Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Monday Night Huddle. I'm your host, Matt Brown, and we have a great episode for you guys tonight. Of course, we've been gone here. We were on Labor Day weekend was last weekend. Of course, we were a little busy then, so we didn't do a show then. And we've had a lot of stuff happen, especially in the world of wrestling, which is why we're going to do tonight's episode. It's going to be basically all wrestling. I know we usually open up some products and stuff, but I don't think we're going to have time tonight because we have two guests coming on to talk everything you wanted to know about everything that's happened in wrestling this past probably month, which has been, what's happened in this month has been like almost a year's worth of news. It's just unbelievable, some of the wrestling stuff that has happened. But before we do that, a little update on Hotbox cards. Hotbox cards, we are getting ready to start working on our September boxes. We will start shipping them out probably next weekend. So look for a preview video coming up on our YouTube page. And make sure if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're ever on Facebook, make sure you hit the like button as well. Also, we have a little preview or pre-sale is we're going to do our trick or treat packs we do for Hotbox cards. Those we're going to start doing a pre-sale probably next week. I know a lot of you guys get into those trick or treat packs. They're very popular. We'll be doing those again as well. Chris Ellis, our buddy Chris Ellis, is on, another big wrestling fan. You're going to like this episode tonight, Chris. We got a lot of wrestling stuff to talk about tonight as well. All right, let's bring on my first guest. You know him. You hate him sometimes. That is my boy, Keith White from TNT Games and the Keith White Duo. I guess I got to mention that as well. Keith, how you doing, sir?
Oh, I am doing fantastic, Matt. Glad to be back on again. I can't wait to talk about everything that we have going on. You are correct, man. In a month's time, there has been a year's worth of wrestling stuff going on. We always say it's the best time to be a wrestling fan. You've got 6-7 nights a week of different product you can watch, and we're just seeing like another boom in a different way. I tell people all the time, it can never replicate the 90s or the 80s. It was a different time, but I think right now we're really seeing some really big box office numbers.
Definitely. And you're not in your car tonight, which is a change for you. Usually you're doing the show from your car. So
with you just screaming at me for safety. Yes.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Yes, definitely.
I'm safe and sound.
Right. And we also have another guest on tonight, his first time coming on. Now, originally I asked for Chris Slye to come on, and then they threw me a curveball. They brought the other guy who used to be part of Mixed Tag Podcast. That is the one and only Cam Manning. There he is, sir. Cam, how you doing, sir?
What's going on, guys? I'm excited to be here.
All right. First time on the Monday Night Huddle show. Best show on YouTube that I host.
Oh, of course.
I don't host any other shows.
I would just say best show on YouTube since, like, I don't know, whenever you guys stopped.
Well, the Mixed Tag really. Did you guys do YouTube shows?
We didn't. That was a shot.
YouTube presence.
That was a shot.
Okay, so
yeah, I'm starting early.
Definitely. Cam, what do you have going on? Keith, I wanted to promote his TNT Games and stuff. What do you do?
I got this.
Okay,
I got this little one. Ever since the Mixed Tag stopped returning my calls, I'm more so just back to just being a wrestling fan and a watcher. I haven't found a new podcast to run in on lately, so I'm looking. I'm a free agent, as they say. My contract's up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't just change the number. They totally banished Mixed Tag. They just got rid of it. So
see, I didn't know that until like 5 days after it happened.
Oh, that's not
just
good.
stopped answering.
Yes, there is some football news. Aaron Rodgers is hurt already too. You guys can check that out. We'll talk that probably about next week. But we have a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. From the last time we talked anything about wrestling, a lot of things happened. I want to start off first with the untimely passing of two legends. One, an older legend, and one kind of a current star, and that would be Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt. Let's first talk a little bit about Terry Funk. He was NWA Heavyweight Champion in 1975. From Wikipedia, he had a 424-day run, which is pretty good. He also reinvented himself like everywhere he went. That was crazy. He went from the territory days where he was like, just a wrestler, a grappler and stuff. Then he reinvents himself in 89 against Ric Flair. Then he reinvents himself for the death matches, then ECW, and then he becomes a legend as well. Let's start off with our boy, Keith. Keith, what do you have? What do you want to tell us a little bit about Terry Funk that most wrestling fans might not know?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the reinvention. I would just like to bring, you mentioned 89 with Ric Flair. People, mainstream audiences had never seen somebody get pile driven through a table quite the way that Flair did to that Terry Funk did to Ric Flair. And by the way, that was not, nowadays we have gimmick tables, so like they're meant to break. That table was not set up that way. Ric Flair often says that Terry Funk called those things on the fly. So that was not a planned part of the show. He was not necessarily no one knew he was going to actually do the pile driver for the table. And so he was unpredictable in nature. He was a big family man. And people like Beulah McGillicuddy and others have talked about his generosity. So I think that people would not, necessarily expect that. To be very honest, man, this is going to sound, I hope this people don't take this offensively, but like this was merciful because he had been in such pain and so debilitated for a long time that it kind of, ended his suffering. He was really struggling for years. I mean, and I would recommend that people go back and there's a documentary, Beyond the Mat, came out in the 90s, so you get the Attitude Era, but you also get to see what it was like for Terry Funk then. And even then he garnered sympathy, for what the abuse he put his body through. Shout out to him too, man. ECW's first pay-per-view, he wins the world championship and kind of solidified them, put them on the map, made them legit. So he was just always if he was able to be in AEW, I think he'd be in AEW, but God rest his soul.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty much main evented every major federation, whether it be the WWF, NWA, WCW, Florida Championship Wrestling, everywhere the guy main evented.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I always make fun of Cam a little bit because I always tell me he doesn't know any wrestling before 1994.
Sure.
Or 95. But Cam, you probably have watched a little old school ECW. I want to know if Terry Funk doesn't come into ECW, if ECW a success turns into a success like they did, or would they have never made it?
It's hard to definitively answer that, but if I'm gonna have to go one way or the other, you would almost have to say no, right? Because and Matt, you rib on me for this all the time, and it a lot of it is true. Some of it is just rude, but a lot of it's true. For me, Terry Funk and my wrestling fandom never really crossed paths. I knew, and again, as Keith said, I want this to come off as genuinely as loving as possible. I was a fan of Terry Funk because of the mythology and the lore of Terry Funk. Like that's what I knew. I didn't necessarily watch him per se, but the stories of the guys in the back, like, hey, who can go one step further than Terry Funk? And the answer was always nobody, but they just kept trying. And it was always Funk at the end of it. Like you guys seriously aren't going to go past me. So please stop. You're only going to hurt yourself, because he was willing to do what everybody else wasn't. And that really, to me, as somebody that wasn't so much of an ECW passionate fan, maybe such as Keith was, to me, what Funk did was what ECW took as kind of the embodiment of itself, and it drew from who Funk was at his core and what he was about in the world of wrestling, and that's in the ring and out of the ring. I feel like ECW molded that and shifted that as to create a better part of its own personality and what it ultimately became and ran with. So, I would have to say no. If Funk doesn't show up, it's definitely a different looking ECW. Successful still probably, but I don't know if it's successful to that level.
Right. Now, Keith, I know you were a big ECW fan. What about the same question for you? What do you think happens to ECW if Funk does not come in?
He made a good point. There's legitimacy to the whole idea of Funk giving them the credibility to have the best way I can describe it, if I'm going to do modern terms, is how AEW brought Jericho in. Terry Funk was that for AEW. It gives them credibility, gives them a foot in the door, gives them some avenues they might not otherwise have. Because at that point in time too, he's a legend, right? So he can decide where he goes. Japan, been to WCW, a cup of coffee in the WWF, and then he gets back there eventually. But he chooses this promotion that is just gaining steam, gaining traction, and then they actually get a pay-per-view, which by the way was hard to do back then because of a guy named Vincent Kennedy McMahon who was just not letting anybody. He would mess with cable providers and different people and say, "Hey, I'm going to strong arm you. This can't happen." But ECW was this thing that people looked at and they were like, "I feel like I'm not supposed to be watching this."
Mm-hmm.
And and the legitimacy of the hardcore. There was nobody more hardcore than Terry Funk. When you're doing exploding barbed wire death matches, and Chris Ellis said the promo after he won the title, yes, made it credible. It was awesome. The idea of this broken down old man who shouldn't have it anymore, shouldn't even be there, being able to still compete and hang. He made everyone he wrestled there, like he got them over because they're wrestling Funk.
Right. Let's do our favorite. Do you have a favorite, Cam? Let's start with you. Do you have a favorite match moment of Terry Funk's? Can you name a Terry Funk match?
Can I name a Terry Funk match? Yeah.
Okay.
I remember the promo that our favorite moment. I'll give you this one. I remember the promo that he cut, and it was so good. And I don't know if I can tell you a line from it, but I remember it because it was the torn up like white shirt, and he was wearing like a red headband around his head. And it was like the old WWF, the Raw is War microphone standing in the middle of the ring, cutting that promo. And I just distinctly remember that. And I don't know why the first thing you asked me, that was the first thing that came to my head, but I remember that being that moment for him at that time. Mm-hmm. Not that, you knew what I meant by that, but like it like there, he had that moment. Like that was his in the middle of that ring. And I remember that moment.
And that was during the Attitude Era, I'm guessing, when he was going. Okay.
Yeah, Keith got to back me up on this one. I'm right. I'm seeing the right thing, correct?
He had a moment as Chainsaw Charlie, and with Mankind, and as they kind of got away from that, he came out back as the Funker. So the T-shirt you're talking about, he had the ripped up white Funk You T-shirt with the like the striped pants and the red bandana.
Yeah.
So they did have a little bit of time in the WWF with him going with his real name, because they were trying to have, Cactus Jack or Mankind versus Funk kind of like end their tag team in a way.
And that's the thing that I remember the most, Keith. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that relationship with him and Foley is what I remember the most with those two, both on screen and off screen. Just hearing Foley just so genuinely with love in his heart talk about that man is a lot of the things that I remember.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite wrestling match of his?
Wrestling match
or moment if you want to. I just figured, since you're the wrestling encyclopedia, you would come with something good here.
Well, match for me is the Flair match, because here's a guy who's not supposed to ever quit. He's too intense, he's too hardcore. The Funks versus the Briscoes in the NWA, fantastic feud. But for me, it was Flair 89, because he's not supposed to quit. Also, didn't Flair actually beat him with the figure four, which he never beat anybody with the figure four? So that was memorable to me. But to me, it's the night in ECW where one chair ends up in the ring, and then another chair gets thrown in the ring, and then another, and they just, I'm pretty sure it was against the it might have been the Rottens, Axel and Ian, but all of a sudden chairs just go flying in the ECW arena, and next thing you know, they're buried underneath chairs. That was the most memorable thing I remember seeing.
Right. Mine, I want to take you guys back. If you want to watch a good Terry Funk match, Terry Funk, Jerry Lawler, empty arena match, Memphis, in the early 80s. Unbelievable to watch, especially if you can watch the unedited version. You can find it on YouTube, because you have who's the announcer for Memphis? It's Oh, I always get his name wrong. But the announcers are smoking a cigarette before the match, and Jerry Lawler is trying to take Terry Funk's eye out. And there's no sound at all except Terry and Lawler, and Terry's like screaming. One of the greatest matches you've ever seen. If you want to watch something great, definitely go out and check that out. And of course, the I Quit match too. Unbelievable is the I Quit match.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's switch over to a more current star. And this is why I wanted Cam on, because we got to talk about, we had the untimely fortunate of passing of Bray Wyatt, which I mean, Cam, this is right in your alley of wrestling here, is Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt, to me, he was always, it's kind of like a what if situation, you know? What if he would have stayed longer? Because he had some really good stuff, and then some okay, mediocre stuff. And then, of course, he passes away. Big shock to the wrestling community. I'm sure it was probably a shock to you. What are your thoughts or memories of Bray Wyatt?
Yeah, so that was definitely a shock. That one kind of stopped. That one kind of stopped time in the wrestling world. I think you could say that for at least a night. Very, very Chadwick Boseman-esque in the sense of just not a lot of people knew the extent of it, I would say. I think a lot of people knew that maybe he had a bad run-in with an illness. I don't think anybody knew the extent of it. I think that was something he kept very close to himself and maybe only a few others, I would say. For me, I think the one thing that I enjoyed about Bray, of many things, but whenever somebody gets a character, right, it's always like, I was this, so they turned me into this, or I was an athlete, so I became this, or I'm Italian, so I became the guy in the hat, like, whatever they want to go with. And then you get the guys that are like Kane and Taker and those guys, and it's like, all right, you got to kind of imagine this. But in listening to Bray, it was so interesting hearing him authentically talk about, like, no, where I grew up in Louisiana, this wasn't a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I saw these things. I saw people do these things, and these things happen in front of me. Like, it was an authentic version of maybe a thing people didn't think could be authentic. And that is what I really enjoyed from him is, everybody wanted him to be the next Taker, and that's just going to be a conversation forever, it is what it is, right? Like, you're going to fall one way or the other, doesn't matter. But I appreciated the authenticity of something that was maybe darker than people thought there could be authenticity of. And you could tell the moments that they let him have uncontrollably all of the reins, he hit home runs, and he just kept hitting home runs. And you're like, man, like you said, Matt, it's those moments where you just go, man, what if they just gave him all the reins for 9 months? And that'll be one of the biggest things.
Yeah, definitely. Keith, I remember being on the mixed tag when Bray did his shocking return. What was that? Was that Survivor Series, Royal Rumble?
Yes, and I believe Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was such buzz about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of like died off and, went from there. But what were your thoughts about the passing of Bray Wyatt?
Well, of course, it was untimely. And, he leaves behind a whole family, young family, which is so tragic. We were all we were very shocked. The word kind of got out, and, in a different way, it was kind of like when Jay Briscoe passed away, because you got two young guys, who still had a career left, and just ended up leaving behind a young family. So that's the worst part about it. But there is that component of what if, because the shame of it is the last match he ever had was a Mountain Dew lights out match with the hottest star in the business right now in terms of like ascension, and that's LA Knight. But that match was such a dud, and it just really stinks that was it for him. Almost like going out with a whimper in terms of the wrestling career. He had this amazing presence. I still remember loving when he was in the ring with The Undertaker for WrestleMania, and he decided that he was going to, turn upside down, right? Like almost like a spider, and kind of like spider walk over to Taker. Mm-hmm. He was a risk taker. He was confident in his abilities. He did cut that haunting promo, and he was always very. The main word that gets talked about him is his creativity. The guy was incredibly creative, came up with really cool ideas. I might be in the minority, but I loved the John Cena, Bray Wyatt, Firefly Funhouse match. And personally, I thought that would have been a great way to end Cena's career. Like, you know, Cena's just stuck in the Firefly Funhouse and can't leave. I remember seeing that and just, you know, you felt like you were kind of in on the joke, right? Like you were in, you know, it was just fun. They were playing inside baseball and let you in. Bray Wyatt, man, like Cam said, we never got to see him truly dominant, and there was just weird. He would have these weird stops and starts. You know, when I thought
kind of like Cam's internet service.
Cam's internet service also stops and starts. It's you know, the match where he came back and I thought he was going to win. I thought he was going to crush Randy Orton and beat him at Mania. Like there was backstage politics and things like that being played, but we deserved to see a consistent Bray Wyatt. The Chief is in the house.
Yeah, Jeremy Jimenez in the house. I don't think Jeremy's ever been on my show. Good to have you, Chief.
The whole heffing show.
Yes. You know, we talk about Bray. We don't talk about his wrestling. We talk about everything else. He kind of reminds me of Jake, you know, where Jake Roberts didn't have the greatest matches, but his psychology and everything else was so great. And Bray's kind of in that same, you know, world that we have that same kind of situation, I think.
Excellent comparison. I like you nailed that one, because that is correct. Like you don't go back and go, man, Jake Roberts was a technical wizard. No, but Jake Roberts made you feel.
Yeah. Right.
He made you feel something, and everything had a purpose. And that's how Bray Wyatt approached things with his wrestling. So it's a great comparison.
Do you have a favorite match or moment for Bray?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the moment is that return, because you like just the crowd. Like the crowd just had. I love when Edge returned at the Royal Rumble and you got that pop. So I love the crowd, and he comes back as Bray Wyatt, because we had seen him as the Fiend, obviously. But he comes back as Bray Wyatt with the lantern, and Philadelphia just goes absolutely nuts. And then he goes, you know, does the whole thing. That was so cool. But the match, it wasn't a match, but I just loved the absurdity of the Firefly Funhouse match with Cena. I loved how they went through his career. It was just creepy and it was fun. And Chief has a great point. Bray should have been completely dominant as the Fiend.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't make sense for Goldberg to come out and get a win. I agree.
Yeah. My favorite moment is with Cena too, but it's not the Firefly Funhouse. I was not a big fan of that. But WrestleMania 30, his entrance on WrestleMania 30 didn't they have a live band and they played his entrance music?
Yes.
And everything. That was unbelievable, I thought. Like that was when I just got back a little bit into wrestling and I saw that entrance against Cena. Unbelievable, I thought.
Yeah.
My buddy Cam is back. Finally, Cam. Cam, what was your favorite match for Bray Wyatt? Yeah, we don't. Cam, can you hear me? All right, Cam, I think is having a little trouble. We'll have to skip Cam for now. So I thought that would be up his alley for Bray, but guess not.
You know, well, if we can stall, we can stall. But you know, Cam is notorious for having audio issues. I mean, you know, mixed tag sometimes would be, you know, a 30-minute wait just to make sure that Cam's audio was tight. So we'll see what happens.
Chief had a good one too there. My favorite Bray moment was when he had the chorus of kids singing.
Yes.
That was really impressive too.
Yeah.
But that's my favorite Bray Wyatt is the Louisiana character. It's not the Firefly. It's not the Fiend or anything, but that is just impressive when he first came up with that.
That creepy cult leader followed the buzzards. Just so good.
I wish they would have kept that going. I think they could have done so much more with that.
Agreed. And you can reinvent that too, you know, because you know he can have members come and go. You know, he could find salvation and then go back. I mean, there's a lot you could have done with him for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's switch over to AEW. and All Elite Wrestling. There's a lot of news coming out of All Elite. Let's first talk about the All In show. Wembley Stadium, largest paid attendance ever at a little over 81,000.
Yeah.
Not the largest attendance ever, but our buddy Chris Slye just said a comment here. Favorite moment is coming out with the Fiend with the Bray Wyatt lantern, the music, the ambiance, everything was perfect. Gave him goosebumps. Maybe that's why he's not on the show tonight. He has goosebumps. I don't know. And also, Chris Ellis says Wyatt family versus Shield. They had some epic fights there as well.
Yeah, that was
both came up at the same time almost.
They did, and those were fantastic. You know, WWE had the bad rap of not paying attention to tag teams for the longest time, but those 6-man tags were absolutely fantastic. Yeah, and Chris Slye would have been on. Chris Slye has no voice. Voice. Yeah,
that would have been my favorite Chris Slye moments, though, with Chris Slye with no voice,
having him not talk.
Yeah,
oh, man. I got to go ahead and shout him out. He's a part of TNT Games. He's a phenomenal trivia host, which also meant that he needed coverage tonight. So get better, Chris.
All right, I hope you get better, Chris. Come on, we can debate a little bit.
I can't wait. Well, it looks like Matt might be frozen. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
All right. Sorry about that, everybody. All right. Sorry about that. I got to get my internet connection. I got to go upstairs and do my show more often. Oh, Cam's back on. Cam, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent.
What was we were getting ready to start AEW, but what was your favorite Bray moment?
I think my favorite Bray moment was watching him. This is going to be really weird, but watching him take the iteration of what it was in NXT and making it on the main stage with it, with the rocking chair and the weird shirts and the not backyard, but the backwoods montages, and just letting the wrestling world that hadn't seen him yet see him for the first time, and watching it connect, and watching him draw in the audience with the way he spoke and how he commanded the stage, I think was probably, I don't think Bray gets enough credit for being as great on the mic as he was. I think most people will classify him as he was a weird character, or he was a good character, or he was a decent wrestler, or he was a what if story. People don't talk enough about just how freaking good he was on the mic, and how good he was at telling a story in the cadence that it needed to be told in, and understanding tonality, and understanding EQ of conversation, one-way conversation. I don't think he'll ever get enough credit for that.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's finally get back to AEW. All In, Wembley Stadium, 81,000 people. This is probably the first, Keith, show that basically there was no build-up to this show. It was basically, they sold a ton of tickets before they announced anything. You have the first show ever that I remember of being no story build-up for a pay-per-view or a stadium event like this. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
Besides the original All In, no. And even, but that was we're talking a 10,000 seat building to an 80,000, which is, by the way, like, this is where we can say that AEW has surpassed any other company. You can argue that TNA's ratings were better because they were drawing more audience. but that's also different now because the ratings are so different anyway. What TNA was getting, in their heyday, Raw sometimes gets, like that 2 million, 4 million, whatever it was. But this definitely, I think, puts AEW over the edge in terms of alternative companies who are an actual viable alternative to WWE. To be able to go over there and do this is absolutely fantastic. And London has shown, or just Europe in general has shown, if we go back to TNA, when some of their best reactions and production work and things like that were when they went over across the pond, to the point where Cam and I have been talking about this, that we kind of thought that for TNA to really operate and continue to do well, they should have stayed over there, and just made their, because those audiences were going nuts for them and made them look legitimate. So this is absolutely amazing to be able to do what they did, like you said, with no buildup, no matches. I mean, and even it was a little sloppy going in. They were just Tony Khan, that's Cam's boy, was just absolutely just throwing things at the wall and coming up with stuff on the fly just to put a card together. But people ate it up. They bought the pay-per-view, and they definitely packed that stadium.
Right. I was surprised it was not their highest selling pay-per-view of all time. I think the show, if you listen to Eric Bischoff's podcast, and a lot of people were saying the star was not the wrestlers. It was 81,000 people in Wembley Stadium.
And
that was the draw.
And I would agree with that. And part of that, I think, is because AEW, and this is one of their major flaws, and we'll also get to the other person, but AEW had this amazing story that they could have told, which is the Elite versus CM Punk. Real life backstage altercation that led to suspensions and animosity. And this is months ago. This fueled. That's another thing that happened, I think, after we quit, is that after we could do a mixed tag, is that happened. But that was, I mean, when we talk about real life, like real life produces amazing television and stories in pro wrestling. And that itself, if they had put a match on like that, if they had put the Elite versus CM FTR in a 6-man match, I guarantee you people would have bought that. You would have seen it at maybe the highest pay-per-view they've ever had. I do think that because they so sloppily put together this pay-per-view, I think that did hurt numbers. Like everyone wanted to see, everyone was like, okay, yeah, I'll just look, I'll look for a highlight the next day, or I'll go on TikTok and see the crowd. Not a big deal. You still have to put together a card that people care about. And you can't do that if you're just building up with no matches. And Bubba Ray Dudley has a good criticism of Tony Khan. And not necessarily criticism, but he just says Tony is a fan who likes to put together matches that he feels like people will see. And Vince and the company, put together matches you want to see because you're invested in the story.
Right. Yeah. Right. Cam, what were your initial thoughts of the All In Wembley show?
Just a lot like Keith. Keith knows my relationship towards certain things on AEW, but I will say this: AEW deserves all the credit for selling out Wembley. That's incredible, especially the way they did it and how much they didn't put into it, which is kind of like a backdoor insult, but that's just where we are, and everybody kind of realizes that. For them to be able to sell that out is fantastic. And if I was Tony Khan, I would grab a microphone every week and remind people, I sold out, not I, but we sold out and did something that nobody else on the face of the planet has ever done. Period. Stop. Okay, I'm going to set the microphone down now here. We can get on with the show. Like, for sure, don't let anybody forget that. The problem is once you hit play and now you have to give them the show, right? Selling the tickets is great. Now we have to provide the show in which people bought the tickets for. And that was immediately where all of my red flags and question marks were, much like to a lot of people. Now, is there enough talent on the AEW roster that they'll get through the night? 100%, no doubt. I think there could have been a lot more investment. I think they could have done a lot more to get them out of this pay-per-view.
I think, and again, a criticism, and I think Tony Khan looked at this as one night instead of Tony Khan looking at this as 9 months. What can I build into this night that can get us 9 months from now, or 6 months from now, or 12 months from now, or what can I do to get here? And I think Tony Khan thought, how can we sell out Wembley to get to Wednesday so that I can tell people that I sold out Wembley? And it just wasn't a great look in that instance. And it watered it down. It watered the product down, I think, because they didn't have the foresight to look further.
Right. And Cam, that was going to go to my next point, is that there wasn't a significant bump in ratings for AEW on Dynamite on the next Wednesday night. Like, you would think after getting 81,000 people in Wembley, your next show would be like the Monday after Raw is huge, or the Monday after WrestleMania is huge. This Dynamite after this huge show, hardly a significant increase in viewership at all. And which is probably what Cam was talking about. What do you guys think about that?
It's just tough. And like, go to Keith's point. And again, I'm going to acknowledge Keith's point. And Matt, I'm going to just keep diving headfirst into how you ribbed me. Edge versus Matt Hardy. It's not that hard, guys. Take people that hate each other and make them hate each other on camera in front of people that bought tickets for it. This is not that hard. It was right there. And you swung and missed. And more people should be bringing up the fact that Tony Khan swung and missed on that. And that comes into the fandom of like, well, let's settle this here and let's do this. And CM Punk's my guy, so I don't want to get his feelings hurt, which that will lead us into the next segment, which I'm excited to talk about. No, they hate each other. Let them hate each other on camera where other people can see them hate each other. And then they'll tell their friends to tune in and say, hey, these guys that hate each other in the ring are hating each other in the ring right now. You should turn this on.
Yeah, and speaking of that, if I know that, and even if I don't see the pay-per-view, I'm for sure turning in that Wednesday night because I know there's whichever team lost is gonna have something to say, and there's gonna be something more. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. A lot of onions to peel off that layer. And the other thing is kind of bush league to me, man. Was they were inconsistent with, you have All In, right? And you scheduled that a week before All Out. And instead of making All Out a free show for people, you basically insist, okay, you have to purchase All In, and then you also have to purchase All Out. Even Eric Bischoff wasn't going to make you do back-to-back pay-per-views in a week. Yeah. And expect you to purchase both. I mean, somebody dropped the ball on that.
Oh, they dropped a lot of balls, I think. But I had this thought: what if WWE had run that event? Would we have seen more than 81,000?
I do. Yeah, I think so. And I think that when they do, because they're going to, they're going to. It's going to be a SummerSlam. It's going to be a WrestleMania. There's going to be something. The WWE does the exact same venue, and they're going to crush it.
Yeah. Chris Slye says all out between 72 and 96,000 pay-per-view buys made the first AEW event not to break 100 since Full Gear.
And see, this is why we need you with an actual vocal cords at work, so you could come on.
I don't know. I like how he just types in stuff. That's my favorite Chris Slye moments.
That's all I can do right now.
Give me a producer. I'll hire him as a producer. So,
Stat boy.
Yes. Jeremy says WrestleMania 41 or 42 possibly. The only problem is now if WWE wants to go do Wembley, is that AEW's just done it. Like, how's that going to look with them coming in? It might actually hurt them a little bit. What do you think, Cam?
WWE is going to host WrestleMania there in the next 5 years. And they're going to, what did AEW sell at 81,000? What was the number?
A little over 81,000. Yeah.
81,000.
It wasn't a complete sellout though. I think they could have got to 90. I think it said.
Yeah. So what WWE is going to do is they're going to sell it at 95,000 seats at 2 nights.
Yeah.
And go here. Here you go.
And Tony Khan has already announced he's coming back to Wembley next year.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's fine. That's fine. They'll listen. Do we not think WWE will play a game?
Yeah.
Really? Like, we don't think they're like, yeah, no, sign us up. And you know who wins? European wrestling.
Yeah.
That's who wins. Like the people in and around Wembley are like, wait a minute, these two people are going to argue over our location for the next 10 years, and we're going to get to benefit from this. Stoked. And like,
All right, you guys want to make
excited.
a prediction next year for AEW at Wembley? How many people do they end up with?
81,000, and they actually get to it this time.
Oh, you don't think they got to 81,000?
Absolutely not. Did you see the videos during CM Punk Samoa Joe's match? There's like 15,000 empty seats.
Well, but if they sold 81,000 tickets, is that just as good as 81,000 people showing up or not?
Okay, but now we're getting into the WWE territory of where people get mad at them for their ticket sales. So which way do we want to lean here?
Well, they got mad at WWE for WrestleMania 30 or WrestleMania 3 because they were counting like 1,000 people that were working for catering and stuff.
Right, but if you count empty seats, count catering.
Yeah.
Who cares? But I think the AEW actually gets to the 81,000 that they sold.
You think they'll get back to 81? They've never, like, when you go back to a second place, you think they're going to end up with about the same amount?
Ooh. Oh, no. You know what? Let me change. They go less.
Yeah. Okay.
I like 70.
70? Keith?
Yeah, I like 70.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and play devil's advocate. I'm going to go with a brisk 85.
85. Oh, you think this time they're going to do storylines to build up to it, maybe?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think they're actually going to put together a show that people want to see because there's been build up and conflict and things like that.
I'm going 55.
Ooh.
If you look, when AEW does a second show, they have about a 30% reduction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
so you're going metrics on us. I like that.
Yeah.
You didn't say there was math involved, Matt. It's like 10 o'clock.
Hey.
And there's a baby.
Yeah.
How dare you use math in front of the baby?
Hey, he has his baby up at almost 10 o'clock at night. Now, who's the bad parent here? All right. Let's talk quickly about, before I bring these guys on to talk about the CM Punk situation. By the way, look at this. Chris Slye says he's with me, 50 to 55,000. Thank you, sir. You are definitely on the next show, let me tell you. All right, so before we talk about the CM Punk situation, I just want to give you the background because I think this is very important. I had to write it all down, okay, folks, because a lot happened before the CM Punk backstage incident happened. First, a little bit about the background. About a week leading up to this show, first you had the Collision episode where Jack Perry wants to do a spot with Real Glass. He's talked out of it, and the producers eventually get CM Punk to talk to him, tell him, we're not using Real Glass on this show. CM Punk's basically he wasn't running Collision, but he was definitely a factor in some of the decisions that the Collision show was doing. Then you have Punk that is supposed to meet with the Elite in Atlanta, and the Elite canceled the meeting last second. Then Punk goes over to England for All In, and nobody shows up to pick him up. Okay, nobody. He takes the tube, which if you know London, that's basically their metro or their subway, to their hotel. Gets lost. Has to have fans actually bring him to his hotel, and of course, if you have a star like CM Punk or anybody else, you have a driver there for him. Why he doesn't have a driver there, who knows? But all this stuff's leading up and really causing the confrontation, I think, that we eventually see. Then you have the pre-show. Jack Perry actually does the Real Glass spot and looks in the camera and says, "It's Real Glass, cry me a river." And that's when he goes back. After the match, he goes backstage. CM Punk's there in the gorilla position, waiting for his match. And now there's a different accounts what happens. What we do know, though, is that CM Punk put him in a chokehold and caused a big ruckus. Who knows who started it? There's video, but we've never seen it. But the outcome of that is Punk was fired and Jack Perry was suspended. So let's start off with Cam. Cam, what were your initial thoughts when you heard about this crazy story of CM Punk and Jack Perry?
I thought, oh, wow, CM Punk ruined a fourth locker room in his career. That's crazy. Wow.
Okay.
And then that's what I thought, because it makes total sense, because all CM Punk has done his entire career is ruin locker rooms. He's better at this than Terrell Owens ever was.
Okay.
He is a Mount Rushmore locker room cancer all time in sports history. Like, it's always been his fault, except for if you ask him.
Well, let's ask Keith White. Keith, do you have a different opinion, maybe?
No, but this is where Chris Slye would have come into play because Chris, that is his boy, and Chris has a different take on things that, sometimes, and what's interesting too is the Jack Perry thing is so stupid, but I'm blaming Jack Perry, and AEW as a whole, road agents, whatever. Why in the world would you use glass? Like, there's no point. And if you go back, Goldberg damn near lost his life, for a spot. Let's not play around. None of us care. Use the fake glass. We don't care. But there's blame to go around, especially with AEW as a company. Why in the world do you have this new show that conveniently looks like Nitro in terms of the logo? Cam, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Where people are like, I only want to work Collision, right? Like, they're like this. The stars are telling you what they want. Like, the employees are saying, this is what I want. You better give this to me. There's nobody in that locker room to just kind of like lay down the law. I'll speak for Slye. Slye believes that CM Punk was trying to be that locker room leader, and that the young guys now just don't respect the way that you hear about the other guys do, where they would listen and take whatever they could from the veterans and make it their own, where the young guys now just basically say, hey, appreciate it, man, but I'm good. I'm going to do my own thing. And I've heard that from various criticisms of the AEW locker room. But it is weird and coincidental how Punk is always in the middle of things, in a locker room situation where the morale is low.
Yeah, definitely. What is next for CM Punk? Do you guys, we have Survivor Series showing up in Chicago in November. Any chance we see CM Punk in WWE?
If I was WWE, I would stay far away from him, and here's why. You look at AEW, where they were when they first became a company. You look at CM Punk. The ratings were a bump of 100,000 viewers, maybe 2.
Mm-hmm.
He's not bringing in 3-4 million viewers. He's not bringing that many eyeballs to your product and sustaining it. Because remember, like, he came back, everyone was excited. Gigantic pop in Chicago. Now it wouldn't be the same, right? He's just like, okay, yes, he's back in WWE. But the viewership is not like there's not this group of people that are only waiting to see CM Punk and then they're good. I just don't see the point for WWE. They already have a stacked roster with great talent and good storylines. Why would they want to bring him in and potentially mess that up?
Right. Cam, what do you think about Punk possibly going back to WWE?
Keith, I love you and I adore our friendship. I just love the fact that for 5 minutes you danced around the word draw as much as you possibly could without actually saying it. And I just got to say, this is why we're friends.
Yeah, man.
Because you're just setting me up for the alley-oop. He doesn't draw outside of Chicago. Like, he just doesn't. Right? We now have evidence. We now have evidence in 3 companies. He doesn't draw outside of Chicago. Like, would the pop be dope? Sure. But is it worth the headache? Never in a million years is it worth the headache. And going back to what Keith said, like, I sent this to him the other day. The reason why AEW's roster seems a little crazy right now is because there's nobody to hold wrestlers court back there. Mm-hmm. There's not that one guy that they trust. It's not Sting, because I don't think he really wants to. I think he just wants to collect checks, have his last ride, and get out of there. And good for him. He's earned it. It'll never be Jeff Jarrett because he'll demand $400,000 just to hold wrestling's court. And Tony Khan will pay it because he's an idiot. And it can't be CM Punk because CM Punk's trying to lead a generation of wrestlers that only know him as retired. And he's not there every day. Like, he's not an every down back, to use NFL terms. Like, he was retired for most of these guys' come up career. Like, they don't trust him. And anybody that could hold wrestling's court is a VP, and they don't like what most of those guys are doing anyways. So like nothing is going well for them right now as far as somebody to just take charge. And that's also part of the problem. No, they shouldn't go anywhere near CM Punk. There's no reason. There's no upside. There's zero upside for having to deal with the headache that he is going to bring.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was going to also add, like, the only two guys that I can think of that can and should be the wrestler's court type enforcer are two guys that should have done it already, and that's Samoa Joe or Chris Jericho. You know, in terms of, I mean, Samoa Joe, like, in terms of the respect level and also the intimidation factor, like, where you just don't want to piss that guy off. You know, Chris Jericho just being the veteran leader, but they clearly they would have done it already if they hadn't. Does it make sense?
Well, it's hard to have a wrestler's court when you have 3 EVPs that are current wrestlers.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's okay,
and they were a major part of this problem. And to be honest with you, you know, how much blame should Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez have in this whole situation? Like, they started most of this. Cam, would you like? You don't have to raise your hand, buddy. You can just talk.
Call on Cam.
No, Keith knows my just absolute adoration for Uncle TMZ, Dave Meltzer, and what he does for his career. Yeah, no, he should get a lot. Tony Khan gets the most blame. Like, he gets all of the blame, right? Because as a fan, you don't hire current athletes to run the business of the sport that they're in. Like, inherently, that is stupid. It's just dumb. And he did it, and he's reaping those benefits or rewards, or not benefits, but whatever. I think Meltzer's always going to get part of the blame because he is, as I affectionately call him, he is Uncle TMZ. His job is to just put stuff out there that probably nobody thinks is actually a thing, but like, man, his sub rate is fire every month. Like, if I was getting the checks he was getting from his sub rate, I'd put crap out too, man. Like, good for him. I ain't gonna hate the player. Like, or
right, but
you know what I mean?
the EVPs were basically using him to get stories out, trying to get, you know, Punk upset and Punk out.
Yeah, exactly. And he was and Dave is gonna do that because Dave is married to those 3 guys. He's married to Omega and Generation Me. Shout out TNA people. And yeah, he's married to those 3 guys. So of course he's going to do their bidding because he's the guy that he's hitched to their wagons. Good wagons to hitch to if you're in the wrestling world. Not going to debate that. Yeah. But yeah, of course he's going to do that. And of course he's going to make it look the way they want to make it look because he's in their pocket. So yeah, of course.
I think we'll still see CM Punk back in WWE. I mean, we saw the Ultimate Warrior come back multiple times. There's nobody worse than the Ultimate Warrior in the locker room, in my opinion. I think Punk gives them a little boost, actually. You know, you saw a big boost when Cody Rhodes returned to WWE. And go ahead, Cam.
I will agree with your Warrior take, but I will also add that this is a new regime now. These are not the guys that kicked Warrior out that brought him back. This is a whole new set of faces in the front office that do not have to bring Punk back if they don't want to, because they weren't around when he came up. They can look at him and go, we don't owe you anything. We don't really know you. No. And this is the first time, which is another big thing, Matt, like you were talking about. This is the first time in the wrestling world where we're finally seeing this in the WWE side, that there's a new group of people that can look at these older guys and go, yeah, actually, no.
No. And Jeremy Jimenez says, even Bruno came back. That's true. Yeah. And you saw guys like superstar Billy Graham that would sue the WWE every like 5 years. And then they would bring him back, and then he would sue again, and they'd bring him back. Every time he lost a job, he basically sued and brought them back. And I think, you know, we didn't hear this much about Punk and the backstage at WWE like we do AEW. Like, he wasn't putting people in face locks because people actually ran that company and ran it well. And you had a strong locker room presence back there. You know, of course, we heard about stuff after CM Punk left, but while he was there, we never heard anything like this.
Did we ever hear Punk try and fight somebody in the back that was bigger than him? Because so far, all I'm hearing is him picking fights with guys that are smaller than him. And even then, the last time he picked 2 fights with guys that were smaller than him in arenas, he got knocked out in the first round. So maybe there's a theory of a guy that just wants to pick on smaller dudes.
Well, he did take out 2 small guys at one time, the Bucks. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, all right, that's fair. That's one. Okay.
I mean, if you're Jack Perry, like, do you think the Elite put Jack Perry up to all this?
I
Because
think
he is friends with those guys, and it's like,
No, but what I will say, if Jack Perry went rogue and did this on his own to capitalize on this and turn his character on TV, then that man deserves a raise. Because that dude is sitting in the middle of something right now that if he handles this properly, he is going to jump a couple levels over there.
That's Brian Pillman-esque.
People want to see. Yeah.
Yeah, but do you think Tony Khan and them will jump on that?
No.
I think they might, just because he did it to Punk and nobody likes Punk. So give the guy the bump that's got Punk out of the.
Tony Khan has so many opportunities. Eddie Kingston, Brian Pillman Jr. to capitalize on stuff. Hasn't capitalized on anything.
Well, you have to have.
I don't think he knows how to capitalize on anything.
Well, you have to have a competent wrestling businessman to run it to know how to capitalize on things. And AEW just doesn't have a competent dude.
Yeah.
They got a good enough dude, but they don't have a competent dude.
Yeah.
All
right. Any last thoughts on CM Punk? Any last thoughts on CM Punk's situation?
Yeah, good riddance.
Man, I can't believe the hate for CM Punk. Like I'm never a big fan of CM Punk, but I like that old school mentality. Like if stuff happened the way it happens now back in the day, like those guys would have done 10 times worse than CM Punk did.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess for me, it's like I enjoy the matches. I enjoy his promos. But it just appears to me to be a guy who is so big on himself, and just can't, I don't know. There's something about him that he just cannot and will not get along with people, enough to not cause problems. Like Cam mentioned, like 4 different promotions. You've now been, hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. Swifties. But I don't get it. I don't know. And also Cam makes a great point. He went to the UFC, which was an ill-advised move and got destroyed. Right. But what was he trying to prove? He was trying to prove that he was a tough guy. So he has, and he was. I mean, you just go back and check out his interviews and things like that. He believes his own hype, and it's just a shame. It's a shame we're here.
Yeah, Matt, I agree with you. There is something to having an old school mentality, but there's also a difference between an old school mentality and somebody who's just a dick that nobody wants to deal with. An old school mentality, I think, is like, hey, we have a problem. Let's figure it out, and then we're not going to have a problem anymore. And that's fine. I just don't think that's what this is with him. I think it's just genuinely locker rooms full of people that just think he's a dick and don't want to be around him anymore. And also the ice cream he gave out to everybody was probably vegan. That's the last thing I'll say.
But you know what? We when Punk returned to AEW, all we heard was praise, from other wrestlers, how much he helped them, how much everything. And then they turn on him pretty quick, I think. But we'll see.
I mean, Cam made a great TO comp earlier, and I think that's the same thing, because wherever TO went at first, it was like, this is badass. You've got this guy who's going to improve our offense tremendously. And, and he's intense and he's a leader, et cetera, et cetera. And then something happens, something goes wrong. The honeymoon period ends and there's turmoil.
Yeah.
So,
I'll give you a more current comp. Look at Antonio Brown.
Oh yeah. There we go.
The place Antonio Brown was successful are 2 places where the guy in charge was bigger, stronger, and just wouldn't back down to him. And that's why we never heard anything in WWE, because CM Punk still had to turn around in that locker room and see Cena and see Taker and see Kane,
Lesnar,
and Lesnar, and see those dudes that Angle, and see those dudes that ran that locker room. Antonio Brown didn't have to do that in a lot of spots, except for Roethlisberger, who retired and then AB went crazy, and Tom Brady, who was able to control him like those guys were. You get AB into a locker room where nobody can control him because he knows he's the head guy. He's just going to go off and do stupid stuff. Punk isn't a Hall of Famer. Get out of here. Wow.
Hey.
What Hall of Famer? If you're talking WWE Hall of Fame, he's obviously a WWE Hall of Famer. I mean, you guys can be in the WWE Hall of Fame. It doesn't mean anything.
Well, that's what, I'd like to think of the Hall of Fame as something that makes sense or means something, but in wrestling, that's true. We had podcasts, so we're going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. But listen, Slye, like
Conrad Thompson's in the Hall of Fame, in a Wrestling Hall of Fame now. So
yeah, right. I don't.
Anybody can be in the Hall of Fame.
Slye, if being the best person in a bad era gets you in the Hall of Fame, then good for Punk.
Okay. All right. That is going to be all the time we got for tonight. I want to thank my guests, Cam and Keith. Cam, I know we haven't talked to you in a long time since the Mixed Tag podcast ended. Hopefully you come up with something soon and get on a show or something.
I'm a free agent. I'm fielding offers. You know, I have an amount of money I'd like to hit every year, and if we'll see, we'll talk about it. Is what I'm saying. I'm open to conversation.
All right, Cam. We'll be in contact. Now, if I do sign you, do I have to sign the kid too, or is it 2 for 1?
You probably have to sign the kid too, but younger, smaller, much cheaper rate.
True.
Much cheaper.
And I might be able to teach your kid more about old school wrestling,
which would be really good. I think that could be the payment system.
Yes.
Just teach her more about old school wrestling and she'll learn.
All right, Cam. I love talking to you. I love busting your balls a little bit, but I appreciate you coming on, man.
Of course, man. It was the best. I appreciate you having me, dude.
All right. Thanks, Keith or Cam. And our buddy Keith White, of course, from TNT Games. You got a bunch of stuff to promote. I did see you guys are doing the Office trivia coming up here soon.
Yeah, we've got at the Big Chill Surf Cantina, they do theme nights every Wednesday, and we're kicking off this week with the Office trivia. But we've had some gigantic nights there before with things like Harry Potter, and then we're also going to be eventually having like Saved by the Bell trivia, and just a lot of good times with some really very specific theme nights that people are going to go nuts for. So we're looking forward to it. But already the buzz is really strong for the Office one. We did it before in the first season, but I feel like it's even stronger now. So looking forward to it. I'm actually not hosting. I've got great hosts such as Chris Slye out there, working for me. So it's nice to be able to kind of like write games and just know that the personalities I'm putting out there in the front are going to definitely carry the banner for TNT Games. Also want to say real quick that if you hire Cam's daughter, she has better takes than Cam does. So, just a little something.
She has better takes in her diaper probably than Cam has.
Oh, man. But thank you for having us on, man. And we look forward to doing this again.
All right. Thanks, Keith. I appreciate it, man. All right, guys. That's all the time I got for tonight. We'll come back. We'll be here next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, live on YouTube and Facebook Live. We're back to our regular scheduled program where we open up packs, talk sports and everything. But, of course, anything wrestling happens, we'll be bringing on our wrestling guests to talk all the wrestling news there is. But make sure you join us. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. And if you're on Facebook, make sure you hit the like button as well. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great night and a great week.